I definitely miss her presence, day-to-day things. I miss her at night. Sleeping alone isn't quite the same.
It's funny because the things that I miss about him is his presence, but how, everybody has their own smell, their own perfume. I miss that.
Being alone is really a lack of social interaction. Some people would also call that being isolated. Whereas feeling alone, it's that feeling that you get when you are alone or you feel disconnected. And the most common word that we would use for that would be loneliness. The difference between them is that you can be alone, but not feel lonely. You could also be surrounded by people and feel very lonely. In this research study, we were really focused on the experience of carers of a person living with dementia and what causes feelings of loneliness. The first was this feeling of suddenly being alone at home once the person living with dementia has moved to a care home.
It was very different not to have my wife here. So many things I missed. Just having somebody snuggle in bed with at night losing that was monumental.
We really can't make assumptions about what carers are going to experience when the person living with dementia is now living in the care home. We can't assume that suddenly they have a bunch of time available to them because carers are still so involved in that caregiving.
Being the primary caregiver had been a big adjustment to take on that role. And then to give up that role was incredibly difficult because when Sue was first in the hospital, I was spending like 12, 14 hours a day in the hospital with her, and the hospital staff kept coming saying, like, you don't have to be here. We know what we're dealing with. And I just wasn't comfortable. I felt like I was abandoning her.
A quote that really stood out for me in relation to time and freedom was one carer who said, "He needs you to be here every day. You just feel that responsibility. He needs you."
I gave up my involvement with my church, going on missions with them with youth. I gave up on a lot of time with my husband, and those for weekend time, like where we would go for bike rides or things like that.
So on the one hand, you could have a carer who was really included in the decision making, who would say something like, "There's nothing that's happening here that I don't know about." And then that really promoted them to feel trust.
There came a time when I couldn't move him on my own. I had to give up most of the stuff I was doing for him. They were excellent. Every time there was a change, they would phone me.
Other carers felt they had no idea what was going on and might say something like, "Why can't we at least have unit weekly meetings so that I can express my concerns?"
We did not feel always super welcomed. By some staff we were welcomed all the time, but a lot of times we would walk onto the floor and we weren't even acknowledged.
Our research uncovered some interesting things about building a community of support. We found that this was really important, that this could make a huge difference to the experience.
If I ever have a major thing happen, I just let the social worker know and I just blah. And if she's not there, I send her an email and I do the same thing, tell her everything. And she gets back to me, we have a long chat. She's a super duper person.
My kids were a big support, which was good. And I could talk a lot with my sister, which was very helpful too. So my husband would listen. Sort of rant on about how she is. So, I didn't feel unsupported or alone in it, which was good.
One of the results of this process is you lose a lot of your social circle. There's a lot of people that just melt away. The thing that I think saved me was that I kept working. My social life became associated with the people I worked with, and a lot of them were friends outside of that, as well as my sports. I kept playing hockey and focusing on reestablishing my ties with my kids and my grandchildren, because I think frankly I'd neglected them.
It's not always easy to build a community of support. So we would, for example, suggest that somebody reach out to their existing network, but sometimes that network doesn't know how to provide the support that the person needs. We also found that other things like peer support can be really helpful, because a peer group, for example, like a social support group, is a group of people that understand what the carer is going through.
The primary care network, they were really good. They were like, there's support groups, there's this, there's that, there's workshops on dementia. And then at our parents' home, like they had a pastor, Jill, she was non-denominational, and she would have these groups. And I know I could have talked to anybody up there that, you know, to get support.
I'd give a shout out to the Alzheimer's Society, and their Seeds of Hope programs were excellent.
All the people there were like me. We were learning more and more about how to cope with Alzheimer, what the future could be like, what all the resources were available to us.
While there were support groups for people with dementia, they weren't for early onset. And then I happened to find one group through the Alzheimer's Society of Calgary that was dedicated just to early onset. These people understood. I didn't have to explain anything. We all told our stories. All the stories were different, but there was so much commonality because of the challenges of somebody so young requiring so much care.
Others talked about meeting caregivers at the long-term care home. Again, it's a group of people that know what you're going through.
In the dining room area, you're seated, you know, again at communal dining, and so there would be three other people sitting at the table with my mom, and then their loved ones would come. And yeah, you develop a relationship with those people and you support one another.
I got to know people so well because I was there a lot. You become part of the family up there.
It's difficult to offer advice about how to build a community of support to address loneliness, because every caregiver's experience is going to be different. And I think we need more research in this area to really understand what would be helpful for caregivers. But there are a few things. Assessing who's already in your network and what is supportive about it, and reaching out to those people who are supportive can be helpful. Also, not assuming that people in your network have any idea what you're going through or what you need. Sometimes we need to communicate that to the people who matter to us so that they can be a better support to us.